Alright guys, here we are at week 22 for our science project. This week we are going to be exploring siege warfare with a very specific siege engine known as a catapult. What you're going to get to do this week is we're going to look into the history and forces used in catapults. Then, after we've learned about that, we're going to get a chance to make some different catapults that can throw mini pom-poms. Alright, well let's get started. Let's review our words we talked about last week. The first word that we discussed last week was what a siege is. And a siege, again, is a type of warfare where we're going to be invading a fortified city or castle or town. A siege engine, we learned last week, is a device or a weapon used during a siege to help get into the city. And the last word, that is a review word, we didn't talk about it last week, but we have in the past. That word is gravity. And we know what gravity is. It's the ability of objects to fall back to Earth when they are dropped. And that's obviously really important for a catapult, right? We don't want to throw something at an enemy city and have it float up into the space and out into the solar system. No, of course not. We want it to fall back to Earth. So gravity is actually a really important force that we need to mention with our catapults. Now, let me give you a working definition of a catapult. A catapult is basically a device used to throw objects at or over, that's important, the fortified wall of a city or a castle. And catapults are super fun, and they're very entertaining to build and to watch. And I'm really excited to do that with you today. Now, we already mentioned that these catapults work by three forces. One of them is gravity. The next force we're going to talk about is tension. And if you were ever in a game of tug of war over an item, maybe you have a dog at home that has a rope that they really like to play tug of war with you with. When you tug with force on something, that creates tension on the object. And that tension is actually a tool we're going to use in our catapult to help bend it and then allow it to snap back. And you'll see that used in just a little bit. The other word that we're going to talk about is torsion. So the first word was tension. The next word is torsion. And torsion applies to stress on an object when it's round, really tight. I don't know about you guys, but one of my favorite things to watch my kids do is to get on a swing and twist the swing and twist the swing and twist the swing. And then they let go and they just spin and spin and spin. And why is that happening? Torsion. Torsion, as you tightly wound those cords, when they're released, all of that energy is built up and you spin in a circle. And ultimately get really dizzy, which is super fun. So yeah, torsion, tension, and gravity all work together to make our catapult successful. Now we actually have three types of catapults to look at, so let's take a minute and check those out. The first type of catapult we're going to be looking at is called a trebuchet. Can you say that word? Trebuchet. And a trebuchet is actually one of the most effective catapults because it had a large, heavy weight at the front of it that used the force of gravity. It would come down, and as it came down, whatever payload item, stone, rock, or other device that was in the pouch here would sling forward toward the city. And the great thing about this is that the trebuchets were very powerful. They were able to throw up higher, further, and they were very accurate. So if you were trying to get over a really big, tall wall and hit like a particular tower in a city, this would be the device you would want to use. The next type of catapult we're going to be looking at is called a main gonal. Let's say that one more time. Main gonal. Now, the main gonal, you'll notice, has a very different structure. There is no weight that uses the force of gravity. Instead, we're going to be using a tension with a restraining rope here. And then we're also going to be using another rope here with a tension. And there's also a type of spring involved as well with this item. And what's going to happen is we're going to use that tension to force our payload or stone or rock or whatever we're throwing into the city. We're going to use that tension to force it down, and then we'll let the rope go, release the tension, and our payload will go flying. Now, mangonels were a little different than catapults because of the long arm that it has here. When it would release the items would go lower and further and straighter. So this wouldn't be the best catapult to use if you're trying to get over a wall. But if you're trying to knock a wall down, this would be a very good catapult to use. It's not as accurate as the trebuchet, but still very effective in siege warfare. Our last type of catapult is called a ballista. Can you say that word? Can you say ballista? It's basically a very large crossbow. And this crossbow actually uses both torque and tension. It's a huge rope that comes back, and it's actually a twisted rope. You can see it in this picture ever so slightly. The rope is twisted, and you crank it back with this pulley, and when it's time to release whatever payload you have up here at the top, a rock or maybe a really long pole of some sort, when it's time to release that payload, you release the torque and the tension, and it's able to go with great speed and accuracy forward. Now this is the smallest of the three categories, and these were typically used by defenders in cities against people coming in. So this would have been used by the good guys or the people being invaded to ward off the enemies coming into their city. So those are the three types of catapults. We will be building a mangonel, and we will also be building a trebuchet in today's video. The history of the catapult. We're going to be exploring a very brief history of where the catapult came from and which stages in history it would have been most influential for warfare. And the first text that we see a catapult being mentioned is actually from the Bible in 2 Chronicles chapter 26 verse 15. And this would have been when King Uzziah of Judah ordered his men to build engines and place them in towers to quote-unquote shoot arrows and hurl large stones from the walls. Most historians think that around the 750s, this would have been the first mention of catapults of some kind. We definitely know that Greek and Romans used them in ancient times to conduct their warfare. And we actually have a picture here to the right of some of the payloads used from a Greek siege that happened near Syria. And my question to you is, how much do you think each one of these payloads, each one of these rocks weighed? Now remember, this is the part that would have gone into the catapult to be flung through the air. So take a minute, give a guess. Each one of those, what did each one of those weigh? Have a pause, take a guess, and then I'll come back and tell you the answer. So if you guessed 5 pounds, no, these rocks, most people say ranged in weight from about 20 to 30 pounds. So you have to think about how big the catapult would have to be to project these through the air and have enough tension and force for them to travel. They have to be really, really large. So the Greeks and Romans actually really used this type of siege warfare pretty commonly, as evidence from different remains of payloads that we still find and other historical documents. Now, the last time that most historians can see the catapult or a form of a catapult being used is around the late 1070s, maybe even the early 1100s. So by the end of the 11th century, most of catapults have been replaced with cannons, and that's because gunpowder is way more efficient, it's easier to transport, and it's a lot more reactive than this type of siege warfare was. Moreover, the order that these catapults were invented, the first one most people think was invented was the ballista, and this would have been followed by the mangonel, and then the last one that would have been invented was the trebuchet, which is really, really funny to think that they built the best version of it last, only for it to be obliterated by cannon. So it's a really brief history of the catapult. So what do you need for your catapult, and are you ready to build one? Parents, it will be helpful for you to reference page 198 in your Foundations Guide. It has instructions there for a really great catapult, and I'll be walking you guys through that. Let's get started. Catapult number 1 that you have the option of building is called the Cross. This is the catapult that's listed in our Foundations Guide on page 198. The steps are as follows. You need to get your popsicle sticks, a group of 5, rubber band them, 1 rubber band at each end, please. Your second step is going to be getting 2 popsicle sticks, rubber band only at one end, leave the other end open. And step number 3 is going to be to make an alligator mouth by sliding the stack of 5 into the open end of the stack of 2. And you're going to want to try and get that as far back as you can, and once you have it there, secure it with your rubber band by making an X shape. And if you wish, at the very end of getting your popsicle stick built, you may hot glue a bottle cap on here to hold your pom-pom with, but that's not required. I can't wait to see some of these designs. If you're feeling for a little bit more of a challenge, let's check out the next catapult. The next catapult that we have available is called the Gator. This is because it looks like a giant alligator mouth that's being held open. What you're going to need for this are to make 2 triangles with craft sticks. Please note that the triangles should be a similar size. After you have the triangles made, you're going to secure 2 of the 3 sides with popsicle sticks. That means one side should be able to open. What you're going to do is you're going to open your triangle and you're going to slide a single craft stick into that opening. It is a little tricky, but what you should start to see is that your triangles take the shape of an alligator mouth. Once you have that alligator mouth, you're going to pry open your triangles and with a rubber band, wrap and secure the ends of your alligator mouth. Once you've done that, set your alligator mouth down and get 1 more popsicle stick. And you're going to stand this craft stick up at the open end of the alligator mouth and wrap 2 points of that straight standing craft stick where it sits in the V of the triangles. You're going to secure this with rubber bands. My recommendation for this one, secure the bottom really, really heavily and leave the top a little bit more wiggle room. I can't wait to see what some of you guys come up with for your Gator catapults. Also, I would encourage you for this, especially for some of our older students, get creative. What happens if you stretch rubber bands before you use them on your catapult? What happens if you change the size of a rubber band? If a thick one or a thin one, which one will go further? What happens if you make the catapult lever where you're going to possibly attach your bottle cap or shoot your pom-pom from? What happens if you make that even longer? These are all good things to be thinking about as you finish building your catapult. And here I've included just a couple of other examples, but please feel free to make your own and design a really special type of catapult. As you're building your catapult, if this is something that interests you, please check out the links here listed. One is an interactive catapult website through the Children's Museum. The other website is through Nova, and they have a really great entire perspective of siege warfare that not only includes catapults, but also our siege towers from last week. Good luck, happy building, and I will see y'all soon.